if everybody would like to look at the minutes from the last meeting on April 3rd and get a motion to approve that. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Unfinished business, we have the code amendments.
Yeah, we just wanted to be able to present the final code amendments that we're recommending for adoption for all the codes, including the fire code. And if there was any discussion on any of the amendments we were making or anything like that, this would be the time to have the last discussion on it and then have the board's recommendation whether or not we should push them forward or not.
So this is a summary of all the amendments we've already heard.
Yes, it is. These were all presented to you guys as we were going through the code adoption, along with the significant changes to the codes.
For the flood-proof construction details, that's outside of this, correct?
Yeah, this is outside, that's outside of it. There is one thing that was brought to our attention, the CRS program through FEMA. We get more points awarded if we adopt the codes with the flood provisions in them. We usually adopt them out because we have our own flood provisions. So we're asking the board if it would be okay to keep those flood provisions, but use our more restrictive provisions for the city.
Because there were some FEMA updates, right, that they were reviewing those details, like I don't use like the buttress detail that they require. And I know the HBA or BIA now has had discussions with them for adding some additional details.
Yeah, they
that
have.
got shut down.
Yeah, they were, because of the way that it has to be done with the architect of, the engineer of record rather. Having those outside influences and stuff will just slow down the process, and we need to speed this process up as much as possible to get it through. We're going through to renew the basement exemption that Fargo's had since I think the late 70s. And it was one of the only ones in the country, as well as the flood provisions we have right now. The next time these will really get looked at real closely is when the diversion project is done. But they are still free to submit those changes to that from their architect or from their engineers to us as an alternate design to the flood materials. So it's not like they can't do it. It's just that they have to submit it as a different design and have it approved, which it has been in the past. So
Yeah, but then they gotta pay every single time, right? They gotta pay an engineer to stamp every single one.
yeah, so
So-
unfortunately, yeah, that's.
I guess my understanding is like, why is there just one engineer that decides what this detail should be? How is that vetted out?
Well, they're the engineer of record for the original design. That's how it was done when back at, I don't know how many years ago. And FEMA requires it to be the engineer of record for this, so they can't keep adding engineers of record for it. They have to have one, is the way I understand it, so.
It seems like it affects a lot of houses at a lot of costs, cause I don't know, you obviously build houses in this area. Are you always using the whole buttress concept then?
We use it quite a bit. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding. In the past, it was something that as long as we submitted the plan showing buttresses, we didn't have to have an engineer of record. Because that had been developed by the BIA and was approved by the city and all of that. So it wasn't something that you had to bring in a engineer on each home build, which I do want to avoid that because it's a pretty big cost to the consumer. And I think it's unnecessary because if you design something that works on one foundation, it'll work on the rest that are similar. And so the buttress idea is one that works pretty well, especially with our heavy soils when we're backfilling prior to putting a floor on it. Because you could light backfill and the foundation will stay put long enough to gain access to do the floor and do all that, and then worry about the compaction later on, either hydraulically or whatever. So I think people are pretty used to using that buttress type system, so I don't know if something else is in the works or.
Well, we did all this work for the HBA to give alternate details. We don't stamp them all, we just work for them and they can just use those details. But then I think the city requires it, every single job that uses the details then has to go get stamped, which doesn't seem necessary at all because it's just added cost to your point of adding more cost to houses that are already expensive enough.
Yeah, I know in the past that we haven't had to do that, and I think that would be good to not have to do that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that, I'm saying just why, as you're revamping this system, why isn't there more details approved instead of just having this one engineer pick a buttress concept that frankly, in my opinion, doesn't even work, and stick with that only? Like, why do they have that much power to decide that, and you're not vetting that at all?
So the engineering was done, to my understanding, the engineering was done so that you didn't have to have an engineered system on each and every individual house. The city took on engineering a system that we would accept and then adopting it through the city commission. If we start making major changes to that with different engineers or different architects or anybody else that's involved, we have to go through the FEMA process again, which takes a long time.
Well, I'm not saying different engineers. If that engineer gave a different detail, that same engineer, like, would that still be allowed then without going through the whole FEMA process?
If it was for an individual house, yes, as long as it was approved for that house. But for the information that we have to submit to FEMA and that we have for the basement exemption and then our floodplain requirements and stuff like that, that they would have to go through completely vet, and it would have to go through the entire process for making some changes like that to it. That's my understanding of it at this point, is that as soon as we start making some major changes or making some big updates to it, FEMA has to now go through and verify it again and certify it again and go through the entire process again. And we just don't have that kind of time at this point. The anticipation is that when the diversion comes in, that a lot of these provisions could be walked back. There could be a lot of it that just disappears within the next few years.
Okay.
But with the things that are going on with FEMA and the remappings and things like that, we needed to get the information in and changed as quickly as possible so that we can update what we have, and we're just updating code cycles and things like that at this point. We're just, they were asking the HBA or the BIA rather for input on if they saw anything that was a major flaw or anything like that. Taking a look at what's there and speaking to FEMA, the engineering department has determined that it would take a long time to get this done. It could take, I'm not sure how long, months at least, to get this done, and they need to have this process completed as soon as possible for FEMA. Otherwise, we could lose our flood or our basement exemption.
Sure. Well, given it's hopefully just a couple years that it's done using them, that's fine, but I think if you go through this process again, I would highly suggest you open that up.
Yeah.
And just, you have one engineer that's just picking this detail that some builders don't mind. I know some builders absolutely hate the detail with having all those buttresses. It's a lot of extra cost also to do. So it's a weird detail that I don't think really is great, in my opinion, but I think it's gotta be vetted out properly. It's
Yeah,
too much
and-
power to one person just to pick a detail. Now everyone in this whole area has to follow it, and we
Yeah.
already have high enough costs.
Yeah, and the plan
Build a
is in the
house.
future to go through it more extensively and see what else can be done with it. It was
Yeah,
just.
I know,
that-
I brought this up like 3 years ago to go through it again, but then here we had opportunity and we waited till last second, and now
Well-
we gotta hurry up and get it done, so now we can't do it,
And
so.
it wasn't exactly last second. They've been looking at this, and it was a very tight timeline that we had to get this done. So
Okay.
FEMA's going through all their basement exemption things right now, and we need to have this information in, otherwise we could lose it, the way I understand. And if we lose our basement exemption, then we can't build basements in Fargo. So
Okay.
it was kind of a thing to keep something that we had and make sure that we kept it and then vet it properly in the future if we can.
Okay, all right, sounds good. I don't have anything else then.
Anybody else have anything else? Nope. Okay. Do you want a motion for us, Sean, to okay that?
Yes, if I can get a motion and a vote on it, and then also if you would, include in the motion whether or not you wanna keep the flood provisions in the codes or amend them out like we usually do. We're recommending keeping them actually in the codes because it will help our CRS rating with FEMA. But there's enough language and stuff in there to say that we are using the flood provisions of Fargo rather than the required flood provisions in the code.
So we're adopting theirs, but also adopting the Fargo amendments to increase that code is basically what you're looking for?
Yeah, basically it's, we're just gonna keep the flood provisions in there for the CRS rating. And all they basically do is refer you to a section here, a section there. They don't really have any design requirements with them. They say that there's certain things that have to be done, but our flood provisions, the things that we approve, are already above and beyond that, so.
Well, if someone would want to craft a motion to approve the code amendments, including the flood provisions, I think that would suffice for what Sean's looking for.
I guess I'll move that we that we approve the amendments as presented, including the flood provisions, with the additional language in there that provides additional protection.
Do
The
we have a
additional amendments.
Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Moving on to item 3, new business, the appeal from ArchD Design. We'll look into that, and I think we should probably have a representative from ArchD present their stuff first here, and then we'll ask questions, whatever. Board members can do that, and then we'll hear from Sean after. So, if you want to state name and who you are, make sure you turn your, yeah, just hit the, so you get the green light, you should be good. There you go.
Okay. This thing on? Okay. My name is Scott Doms. I'm the owner of ArchD Design. I'm appealing. I've got kind of a narrative written up here, so I'm just going to run through this, and then we'll go from there. Gentlemen, today I respectfully ask you to look at the facts, the timeline, and the fairness of the process. Based on the evidence, it is clear that the correction notice issued against this project should be reversed or set aside. This is not just about a technical violation. It is about following a fair process and whether a contractor can rely on the city's own approvals when building a project. The construction drawings submitted on May 26, 2024, specifically detail 1 on sheet A 1.0, clearly showed fan-fold insulation as the underlayment, with no building wraps specified. The city formally reviewed and approved these plans without raising any objections. At no point during the permitting process did the city ask any questions about the underlayment material shown, request additional product documentation, or express any concerns. And I will also show you that on the inspection report that they had an opportunity 3 times in-house to review that detail, and they approved it. Nothing was brought up before that. As a contractor and architect, we have a right to rely on that approval when moving forward with construction. Additionally, section R703.2 of the International Residential Code states, number 15, asphalt, felt, or other approved water-resistive barrier material shall be applied over studs or sheathing. The barrier shall be continuous, and it goes on and on. We took this language, along with the city's approval of our submitted construction drawings, to mean that the specified fan-fold insulation was considered an approved water-resistive barrier for the purposes of this project. The city's review and approval gave every reasonable assurance that the proposed wall system, including the underlayment, met applicable code requirements at the time the permit was issued. The field inspector visited the site at least 5 different times while the underlayment was fully visible on July 24th, September 17th, September 20th, December 5th, and December 9th. No concerns were raised during these visits, when simple corrective action could have easily been taken. The city missed multiple opportunities to catch and correct any issue. In an email dated April 14th, 2025, it was acknowledged that fan-fold insulation can meet code requirements if tested and approved. Approval could happen during field inspection, but in this case, it did not. The inspector saw the insulation and said nothing. Fan-fold insulation is commonly used and visible on many active construction sites throughout Fargo. If it is considered non-compliant, the city has a broader enforcement issue, not just this project. It would be unfair and arbitrary to single out one project. There's no formal inspection point for underlayment under the city siding permits. Whether the material installed is approved or unapproved, or installed correctly or incorrectly, the city has no process in place to catch or verify compliance. If underlayment is truly critical to life safety and code compliance, then the city's lack of inspection points is a major system failure. And you can look at the approved inspection report, and there are nothing in there that states anything about citing underlayment or inspection of it or whatsoever. The field inspector and head inspector had to conduct research after the fact to determine if the fanfold product met requirements. It is concerning that readily available, widely used products are not familiar to those responsible for code enforcement. If the inspectors themselves don't recognize a standard material during multiple inspections, how can they fairly enforce compliance afterward? There was never any building wrap delivered or installed at this site. Its absence was clearly visible during each inspection. If a building wrap was required, it should have been flagged immediately, not after the fact. Chronological photo evidence shows that the underlayment was exposed during construction and clearly visible during inspector visits. There was no concealment. There was no deception. The project was built exactly according to the approved drawings. At no point has the city provided any evidence that the fanfold installation installed at this project has failed, is failing, or presents any risk or failure in the future. There's no data, no inspection reports, no field testing, and no documented case of material failure related to this installation. Furthermore, both the fanfold underlayment and the siding system were installed according to the manufacturer's installation requirements. No shortcuts were taken, no standards were ignored. Without evidence of harm, defect, or improper installation, the enforcement action is not based on safety or performance concerns. It is based purely on paperwork. Correcting a perceived technicality after the fact when there is no damage, no failure, and no violation of proper installation standards is unjustified. The city's responsibility is to ensure safe, code-compliant construction. When the construction complies with industry standards and no evidence of failure exists, penalizing a project retroactively serves no public safety benefit and only punishes those who followed the rules. Excuse me. If underlayment materials are now being retroactively enforced, how will the city verify what materials were used on hundreds of other projects? There are no inspection records, no underlayment approvals, no photographic documentation for most sidings jobs in Fargo. Selective enforcement on one project is deeply unfair, legally questionable, and opens a citywide problem that the city is not prepared to manage. The city has a duty to review and approve construction documents carefully and completely before issuing permits. Professional contractors, designers, architects, and engineers must be able to trust that an approved plan represents the city's permission to proceed. If the city can later revoke or second-guess approvals after construction is completed, then the entire permitting system loses meaning and credibility. Furthermore, this practice creates serious legal risks. Professionals are exposed to massive unplanned costs for demolition, repairs, and redesign. Insurance carriers may deny claims because construction followed permitted plans. Contractors and designers could face lawsuits from property owners despite doing everything correctly. The city itself could face liability for negligence, breach of duty, and violation of due process. Ultimately, it is the city's responsibility to ensure that what is approved can be relied upon. When the city fails to stand behind its approvals, it damages trust, jeopardizes professional livelihoods, and undermines the integrity of the construction process itself. In this case, the city approved the plans, missed multiple opportunities during inspections to address concerns, and now seeks to penalize the contractor for building exactly what was permitted, based on a process that was unclear and inconsistently applied. The correction notice is unfair, unsupported by the city's own actions, and must be reversed. I respectfully ask you to restore fairness uphold the original approval that was issued, and set aside the correction. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Downs? One question,
Excuse me.
go ahead.
I would have questions at some point, but I'm just wondering if there's a rebuttal or a position on the city's side.
With that, we'll let Sean do his presentation.
So the city's position on this is that 702 or 7032 in the residential code requires the water resistive barrier to be installed. And through talks with the Owens Corning Corporation about the fanfold product, they said that this cannot be used in place of a house wrap or the weather barrier. And I've submitted those emails back and forth with them, trying to get information. So the reason why we reached out to Owens Corning on it was there was another issue with some interior insulation failing and things like that. So we were just trying to prove that Scott actually installed the product correctly, which he did install the fanfold product correctly. But when we asked, does it have to be in, can it be in place of the weather barrier? They said no. So anywhere that there is not a weather barrier under it, that needs to have a weather barrier under it. Now, during the inspections and things like that, and even if you look in Scott's own pictures, there is a substantial amount of felt on the building. And we were assuming that that felt was left in place and is an approved weather barrier. But when we asked the homeowner and Scott about it, we never got a confirmation that that was left in place. So now we have to assume that it's not there. So during our inspections and stuff, our inspector didn't raise any questions because they assumed that the weather barrier was in place. But without confirmation from the contractors or the homeowner saying it's there, we have to assume that it's not now. What we were originally discussing and talking about was the weather barrier on the addition. And during these inspections that Scott was talking about, they were talking about the alterations and things that were made to that addition and the requirement that we needed new engineering and new drawings on those areas because they had been altered from the original engineering that we received. Our position is that the code upholds what we're asking for as well as the manufacturer, and we can't violate the manufacturer's recommended installation practices, and we cannot violate the code. So we have to have underlayment installed where there is no underlayment at this point. And through pictures and stuff, if they can prove that there's underlayment on most of the house, we're okay with that because it is in place and it is an approved underlayment. It is an approved water resistant barrier. So if they can prove that to us, that's fine with us. We don't have to have the whole house recited, and we did give that option before this, but we never received an affirmative that it was there. And actually it was during a meeting with the homeowner that he was showing me these pictures and saying, this is what happened, this is where everything's at. And I said, is that felt still under there? If that felt is there, they're good, they're okay, it's fine. We just need to take a look at the new addition and make sure that's done correctly. But we never received an affirmative or not. So we have to assume it's not there. So we need to have that water resistive barrier in there per code and per manufacturer's recommended installation. So yes, Scott did install the fanfold product as recommended, but he missed the step of having to have that weather barrier there in place before it was installed. And our position is we're just making the call that the manufacturer says you can't install it that way, the code says you can't install it that way, so we have to have it done. As far as the plans that were submitted and stuff, there are other, according to Owens Corning and what they had told us, there are other fanfold type products out there that are approved, and they don't have to have the water resistant barrier under them. So we assume that he might be using one of those products or not. He's just calling out that there's going to be a fanfold product there, but did not submit any paperwork on that fanfold product. We usually don't ask the questions because field inspections catch those things, and through our field inspections, it appeared that there was a water resistant barrier under there, but we don't have confirmation of that now when we ask the question.
First off, is there any lapping over between existing building code rules and new construction, and how does that work with this remodel project and reciting of existing?
As far as, the water resistant barrier or anything
Yeah.
like that? Overlapping, what do you mean?
Well, you've got your existing building code, which may apply to the portion of the home that wasn't added on to, or was just recited. And then you've got, you know, the addition, which clearly would be under
Yeah,
new.
and
I don't know how that's treated by,
usually when you have a project like this and stuff, you're supposed to update to existing building, or to the new building codes, not using existing. Existing is used more for if there's gonna be issues with the building itself, like you can't achieve this provision of the new code because, you know, you're in a concrete building, like a large building, you're in a concrete area and you cannot move the walls because they're both load-bearing walls, and so you can't make a egress corridor larger. Things like that, where it gives allowances for certain things like that. As far as a single-family home, we did not look into the existing building code on this one because there was no reason for us to. When we see reciting jobs and stuff like that, they can use the old underlayment as long as it's not damaged. We don't really say much about it. As long as it's sealed and it's not damaged, it's still a resistive barrier, and it should be, if it's intact, we don't question it very much. And that's why we didn't question it on here either, is because what we saw during inspections and stuff was intact.
When you have an addition to an existing building, though, you don't have to bring the whole existing building to current code.
No, not the addition. The addition would have to be brought up as close to current code as we could get to make it jive with the old building, and we make allowances for that. But this is a whole reciting job. They recited the entire house.
Sure.
So the underlayment, or the water resistive barrier for that, if it was intact, you know, the old one from whenever it was cited before, if it was intact and still in good shape, we wouldn't say, oh, no, you gotta put brand new house wrap on this. We would be like, okay, this is fine. It's an approved barrier, and there's no damage to it. There's no substantial anything to it, so we would not require that.
So what was the existing profile of the wall before you tore it down? Like,
So-
there's studs, and then what were all the layers on the outside of the existing house?
So in the existing house, the addition's on the back. It's a two-story addition on the back, just a small addition. And the existing house and stuff, nothing really changed for the floor plan.
No, I'm saying, like, what's the existing wall, what was there before you started the remodel? Like, what
Yeah,
was there?
so the existing building
Yeah,
is studs, buffalo board. It had felt, which was failing, and it came off as soon as the siding came off. The original redwood lap siding came off, so by the time the inspector showed up, there was zero felt on the building whatsoever. It's just black buffalo board, and unfortunately, the field inspector didn't look.
so there's no more, and the felt would have been
No.
approved for this? Like, if,
Yeah, the fill would have been acceptable, yes.
okay.
Yeah, and I never received an email from Sean or that office. I did receive a phone call from the homeowner about the felt, and I could have lied easily, but I don't. Have integrity. It's not, there's no felt on the building. It's fanfold, and there's fanfold on that building from the time we started to put it on in July, and still visible at the door area that the inspector walked through several times.
Yeah, so the buffalo board stayed, and then you put this insulation on the outside of the
Yeah,
buffalo
so
board, and then your siding.
the fanfold, the pink,
Yeah,
which is
okay.
pretty easily recognizable.
Okay, okay.
their recommendations for putting that on, do they require the taping of the joints and
Correct.
things like we're seeing?
Yeah, so all the taping, it's all taped. All the seams are taped, corners are taped. Anywhere there's a break, it's taped. And then we put it on with plastic cap, ring shank, plastic cap nails. So there are no, other than the penetrations with the nails, and then obviously when you put the siding on. It's not compromised. That's not compromised whatsoever. And the siding that is on there is your LP Smart Side, which is essentially an OSB, an over-resined OSB product. So if you look at the oil-based foam and the OSB resin So which fails first if there's moisture there? You know, as builders, we know that OSB's is gonna fail just on common sense before, a closed cell foam does.
That product is put on without any G channels or things like that, so it's a product that's put on and then coked around windows and door openings and
Yeah,
type
so,
of stuff to
so-
create the watershed.
yeah, so every, when I put it on, it gets run all the way to the eaves. And then around the windows, and then I will flash around, all my jams and my heads on sills into that, and then I'll set my window and I'll flash that out, leaving room for, moisture to weep.
Sean, when you were dealing with Owens Corning, they've got a few different products, some like this that haven't been tested to be a watershed product, and then some that are
Yes,
tested
that's,
to be a watershed product.
yeah, that's what they were saying for this particular product, and I received this information from Scott himself. He sent me the information on the product that he used, and that's the information that I was talking to Owens Corning about. And they indicated that you cannot use this product in place of the water-resistive barrier. You have to have the water-resistive barrier there, and then put this product over the top of it.
They
And the
do have
emails,
products that are similar that
yeah,
can be
they,
done without it.
they have two other products that they indicated that are similar. So it was, if we see a fan-fold product, you know, it's on the contractor to make sure that it's an approved product, that it's being installed correctly, that it's being done correctly.
That was where I was gonna ask the question. Looking at the drawing that was submitted and highlighted, it just says fanfold insulation. It doesn't say any more than that. So it's a system installation that would be, per manufacturer's requirements. So I guess I'm a little bothered by the idea that, we expect the building inspector to review a plan, over a few hours or a few days that took weeks and months to be developed, and then, you know, trying to make the argument that they approved the permit, so they should have, you know, they can't come back and enforce any of the details that are needed to be enforced later on. I don't know if that makes sense, but, I mean, you're kind of saying that because they approved the plan, this is okay, now you can't come back afterwards and do that. But ultimately, it's kind of a vague note that just says fanfold insulation, and what we're hearing is there's multiple options with that, just that one item by itself. If you take that times every element in the building, that's asking the building inspector to do way more than they probably should be able to. So I don't really buy that argument, that they approved the permit, so by continuation, then they approved everything that I put on the building, you know what I mean? I'm exaggerating a little bit.
No,
It's
I
not everything you
understand,
put on the
but
building,
I would
but I'm-
like to know, in conjunction with that, what are you expecting from your siding contractors to know in terms of their level of education of their products? I mean, you're asking,
Well, I would
in a
say,
process,
that-
excuse me, I'm sorry.
I would say any contractor, if they're gonna install a product, they should know how it relates to code. As an architect, it's really hard for us to know every product for every element that we specify. Really difficult, but if somebody is concentrating on, say, concrete only or siding only or something like that, I think they should be held to a little bit of a higher standard than, you know, if they're gonna be installing that product.
So you're actually asking the contractors to be completely honest with what they're doing, because we know that's not gonna be the case. I mean, we live in an imperfect world. So you're asking the contractors, a siding contractor, to fully know the IRC and exactly what's going on and what products they're
I
bringing
think
on.
you're putting words in my
Could I,
mouth.
could I please finish?
Yeah.
Let's have that respect
plow
here,
ahead.
okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. You're asking contractors to know exactly, in a process that has no points of inspection, nothing whatsoever. So you're asking the inspection department to come back to me, who was completely 100% honest about what was on there because I truly believe I didn't do anything. There's nothing on my part that made me do this because I'm trying to make a buck or do anything. I honestly did do this, and I do good work. You guys have seen my stuff around town. I've been published in papers. I've done this level of construction the whole time. The city has always approved me. Always. They've never come out on the siding, and they've never come, ever. Any siding contractor that you ask will tell you that they never come out. All they do is they come by, they drive by to make sure that the address number is on the building, and that's their inspection. So essentially, their fee that they're charging for siding is just a cash grab because they're not doing any sort of inspections whatsoever. And then to tell me that they have zero responsibility in terms of what they approve in their office without raising any questions whatsoever. This is supposed to be a collaborative effort. This isn't supposed to be contractor against the city because we know what happens when that does. People don't pull permits, people try to get by stuff. This is supposed to be a team. And when they start pinpointing stuff against me, when they don't ask the questions and now they're asking me, a team of one guy, I'm an architect and a contractor. I have 0 employees. I design this stuff. I don't sit in my office for weeks on end enjoying my coffee and figuring these things out. We draw this detail up. We submit it to the city. The city has 3 times in-house to approve this drawing, which they do. They raise 0 questions about what that fanfold is when it would easily, very, very easily be able to be looked up and figured out before this siding goes on. And now you're asking me, a team of 1 person, to rip off and replace $60,000 worth of siding. I meticulously went through this house. I pulled off the old original redwood siding. I finished the redwood siding. I flipped it around. I recycled it and put it in. Every soffit on that house is redwood siding. And it's not documented on my plans for my contract with the homeowner. So as soon as this siding comes off, that house doesn't look, that house on your prestigious 8th Street does not look the same. It looks like every Cracker Shack in town. So you guys make the decision, but it's just like, this is a team. This is a team effort. And the fact that they're coming after the fact and asking me to take $50,000 out of my pocket and replace this stuff is ridiculous.
I think, the enforcement is the responsibility of the AHJ, that's clear. I mean, they're responsible to enforce the code. Compliance is clearly the responsibility of the design professional. We tell our people all the time, don't rely on the code official to catch code violations. They're a double check. It's our responsibility as the design team to design to code. If there's ever an issue, if we're ever brought before a jury in a jury trial, the code official's not gonna be sitting there having our back. It's gonna be us, and it's gonna be as the defendant, and it's gonna be the plaintiff. So we always tell our people, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure things are designed and detailed correctly. So I guess I would ask, you know, the detail was drawn by you, correctly?
Correct.
Correct. So that detail showed fanfold insulation. There's multiple types of fanfold insulation. Was there a specification that went with that, or was it just?
No, this is a small retail project. We don't submit.
I understand that, but a sheet spec on the drawings that said what type of fanfold insulation, if the intent was to use that as a weather barrier, then having that detail say, this is the specific product that should be used, instead of just saying fanfold insulation, because I think, you know, there's an assumption if they're seeing that product on there and it's the only thing that's on there, that's acting as a weather barrier, because it's clear from the correspondence here from Owens Corning that particular product that was used cannot be used as a weather barrier. So if that's the case, then there either has to be a weather barrier there, or if the code requires a weather barrier, which it clearly does, then I don't see how there can be an argument that it can be left the way that it is, regardless of whether the code official caught it when they were doing an inspection or not. Because ultimately, if that product fails and there's an issue with that wall, and we can argue whether that's gonna happen or not. I mean, there's other things in there that are providing a barrier, but it's not a code-approved weather barrier. So if there is a failure and there's, you know, a lawsuit that comes between you and your client, you wouldn't have any recourse because it's very clear that the product that's on there is not a weather barrier. So I guess that's the question that I would have is how, you know, given all of those things that I just said there, this product's not an approved weather barrier per that correspondence. The felt has been taken off, so there is no weather barrier even on the existing part of the house. How do you resolve the fact that there's no weather barrier there at the end of the day?
No, and I don't disagree, Brian. What I disagree is whose responsibility it is at this point, because I followed all the rules.
But
I followed all the
you
rules.
didn't follow the rules. It's your job as a contractor to follow the building code. You have to know it. And I get you're saying you're a one-person contractor, but it's your job to follow the residential building code. If you don't know it, then you shouldn't be being a general contractor then. You have to know it. It's your responsibility. The city just, yeah, they can come through and try to catch the things, but if you're gonna be a general contractor, you have to know that code, and your sub should know it as well. That's the facts around it. It's unfortunate, you know, it's a bad situation, but, I mean, you drew this up, you're saying you're also an architect as well, so between being an architect and the contractor, it is your responsibility to know what the building code says and follow it. I mean, that's just the facts,
So we're gonna retroactively go through every project in town and do this.
no, we're not talking about other projects, we're
Yeah, I
talking
think
about
that's
this
a-
one project.
But I think that's a separate issue, and maybe there is a conversation that should be had about this. If this product is being used universally by people all over town, and it's not being, it hasn't been caught, but now it has been caught, I mean, it doesn't excuse the fact that it happened in this case, the fact that it may have happened many times in the past, but now that they're aware of it, it won't happen in the future, I'm sure. So, you know, that's the big question here is, you know, does non-compliance in this one case, can you justify that given the fact that this hasn't been caught in the past or hasn't been enforced in the past or whatever? It's clearly a provision of the code. It's clearly the responsibility of the design professional to follow the code. It's clearly the responsibility of the AHJ to enforce the code. So, given those things, they're within their rights to enforce the code in this situation. And in any other similar situation going forward, now that they're aware of it. But, you know, as far as how you handle things that have been done incorrectly in the past, that's a question for somebody a lot smarter than me, but I'm not sure how you would deal with that. And maybe there's been, you know, similar parallel situations with other products in the past where something has been brought to your attention and going forward, enforcement has been different of that. I don't know, Sean, if that's the case or not, but.
Yeah, I did have a conversation with my residential inspectors when this came up. And I specifically asked them, you know, have you guys seen this product out there? Have you been seeing this product out there? And none of them can recall seeing this product out there very often. They may have seen it once or twice here or there, and it's usually on not an existing house, but a new build and stuff, and they can clearly see that the weather barrier's been installed underneath it. So one of my inspectors remember seeing something similar to it. He can't verify that it's exactly this product, but a similar insulation product on the outside over the top of the weather barrier. That's the only one we could think of, or any of them that our inspectors could remember. We do have instances like this in the building code, the residential code, the electrical code, all the codes that we enforce, where we may have been looking at a product or not noticing a product that was in non-conformance, and as soon as we find it, it has to come into conformance. Specifically, say like in the electrical field, there's a state requirement that things have to be listed and labeled. Well, our inspectors have approved products in the past, small products in the past that are not listed and labeled, and they didn't know they weren't listed and labeled because they had the appropriate stickers and things on them, but then when somebody raised the question about, well, is this listed and labeled, is this meeting code? We had to dig it into it farther, we found out it's not, and going forward, those were no longer allowed. So there are lots of products out there that have, you can buy the exact same product, one's half the price because it is not listed and labeled, it's not tested, it's not done the way it needs to be done. So yes, we do see this fairly often sometimes, where there's a product that we have to say, you can't use this. And they're like, well, we used it in the last one, you guys didn't catch it. Well, if we didn't catch it in the last one, there's not much we can do about that. We're not gonna go back there and we're not gonna make you tear out a piece of equipment or tear an entire thing apart. But this is not a retroactive thing for us. This permit is still open and active, so we are enforcing on this permit. In the future, our guys know to look for it and make sure that they're not using it improperly. So, I mean, it is something that we have had discussions about, and we continue to have discussions about products like this within the department. I can't say it doesn't happen, because that would be a lie. We all know that it does happen. We all know that when we look at plans and things like that, like Scott says, we're in an imperfect world. When we look at plans and things, we may see something on the plan that appears to be correct, but and under field inspection, it's not correct, and then we ask for that correction to be made. Same thing we're doing here. And we do that on most projects that we have. I'm sure you guys have experienced it.
I know we've had projects that we've worked on where it's gone through plan review, everything is approved in plan review. You guys have come out, inspected it, and found something that doesn't meet building code or wasn't designed by us and didn't meet code, and you say it has to be fixed.
Well, we've had things
We've-
like that
that
that have been
happen- that
designed by
happens a
us.
lot
I
to
mean,
us.
Yeah, it's
And
not,
then
not uncommon.
We, the owner doesn't pay for it. We end up paying for it to fix it, so.
But like
Because
after
we
the
designed it incorrectly
After
in the
the
first
building's
place.
finished and
After
everything?
the building is finished and things gotta get ripped out and reinstalled to meet building code. That
done it.
happened to me, that's happened to me more than
Yeah,
once.
it's happened to all of us.
So
And,
all
you
of
know,
us
it's-
have probably had that happen to us.
It's expensive education, but employees don't make the same mistake twice when that happens.
Yeah, so we usually talk to the employee that did it and say, this was a mistake, but,
Our
and,
employees usually don't make that mistake twice either, because we don't like costing people a bunch of
yeah,
money.
but it has, that kind of situations
one-
probably happen to all of us.
One question that I'd have with Owens Corning is, if they've got 3 products that can be used that are fanfold products, 2 of them are approved as a weather barrier and one's not, why is that one not? Is it because it's a perforated material, or is it because it's never been tested? And one option might be to call Owens Corning and say, is this just a newer product that hasn't been tested in that application, and get it tested so it could be approved? That might be a path, you know, if there is an option to do that, but, that happens often when new products are released and they just haven't gone through the testing process to meet that requirement or something, and they figure, well, we've done this, we've tweaked this aspect of that product over here, but we haven't tested it as a weather barrier. You know, that's our intent down the road, but it just hasn't gotten to that point yet or something, you know?
Yeah, and we're perfectly open and willing to accept alternative designs and materials. It's right in the code. If something like that can be brought from the manufacturer saying it does meet specs, it just hasn't been tested yet, and they can show that it's equivalent to another product that meets it, then we can allow those products and things like that. But if they come back and say, no, it's because it's a perforated product, it doesn't meet the weather resistive barrier, application, then no. I don't know how long this product's been on the market, and they don't really indicate in the emails and things.
Well, there's an email here from Alicia.
Yep.
There's an email from Alicia with Owens Corning that says it's a perforated board and will not act as an air barrier, even if the product is taped. So it is perforated.
That must be the reason that they're saying that it doesn't act as a weather barrier.
So there's no responsibility for you guys to say, which fanfold is this? It's just all on me.
Unfortunately, we rely on others to tell us what products they're going to be using. Otherwise, things like this can happen, yes.
But there was no cut sheets, nothing with the documents that were submitted or anything like that, and they raised no questions 3 times. It went back to review 3 times.
If you're using a product and you're not sure which product you're using yet, us asking you the question 3, 4, 5 times isn't gonna get us an answer. It ends up being a field inspection at that point.
Okay.
And then
So-
we start asking the questions when we see the products.
How do you know that, like, I used ring shank nails on the siding, or I used, the proper PSI of concrete in my footings, or, galvanized bolts in my mud sill, or
It's not
anything like
it's
that?
not the city's responsibility to check every single
No,
thing.
I know that, but now you're just like, yeah, it is the city's responsibility.
I'm going to
When-
actually
when-
interrupt
when
for
they
just
go-
a minute here. So this meeting is governed by Robert's rules. This is a hearing. I know it's a little bit different because we are in a different setting. It's a little more conversational, but I do want some point of order. So I'm kind of looking at the chair to kind of, rather than this back and forth, have some order to this as well. I understand if, you know, a board member asks you a question, but I think we should try to keep a little order and respect.
With that in mind, we'll proceed in a little more formal way, but, Sean, one question that I would have is how much input has the homeowner had on this process? And I know this build has had, the insulation problem, and now it has this problem, and, have you had conversations there, or where do we sit with, 'cause at the end of the day, the homeowner's the one that's, dragging the chain, so.
Yeah, I have had meetings with the homeowner, and he has called me, talked to me, emailed me, and things like that, and I've informed him of everything that I found along the way. As soon as he contacted me and wanted to speak to me about things, I've informed him of everything that I found along the way. So, actually, he's the one that brought in pictures and showed to me that there may have been felt behind this product, and I thought, that's good, that's great, if it's back there, then we can approve this and we can move forward and just worry about the addition. And that's when I said, talk to Scott and see if he can verify that that's back there. If he can, tell him to submit it to us, and then we can move forward. So I have been trying to keep him informed as much as possible from our department and stuff. There have been some issues with him and contractors and things like that, so he felt more comfortable talking to us about things, especially about what corrections need to be done, what needs to happen. He's also the one that went in and took down the sheetrock so that we could see the insulation on the inside, see if it was failing, see if it was okay or not, things like that, and that's where the pictures came from that we submitted last time for the other appeal that we were gonna have last time, and those are the pictures that caused it to be withdrawn. So, yeah, I've been trying to speak to him and inform him of everything that's going on.
For the record, I had nothing to do with the insulation failing. It was Retrofoam, and he fired them. Just, he went against my judgment.
I see there's 3 different siding, materials used on that home. I know one of them's been defined, the other 2 have not. I'd like to hear what those other 2 materials are.
There's two materials of siding.
I see there's some wood, some shake, and some lap.
So the wood is just, the original lap, redwood siding, 10-inch lap redwood siding that we took off, refurbished, turned it around, sealed it, and put it back on the house in a board and batten fashion. And then the other one is, LP Smart Side, that's all, ends have been painted as they're cut, OSI caulked in, which is, anyone that's used that knows it's a difficult product to use, but it works real well. And repainted. So there is
There was a little bit of shake on there too, is that
there's a little LP, the LP shake, correct.
okay?
Everything's caulked in, painted in. I'm meticulous in my building.
Yeah. I guess, Sean, one of the things I would bring up, and it's just, last fall was 50 years in this business, so I've seen the code progress a long ways. But siding applications that are on this home were done for decades without any underlayment. So I'm talking a little bit about the intent of the code rather than the letter of it. and how the homeowner feels about that. That's why I asked that question. And if there's a way to, at the end of the day, I want the homeowner to feel that the city and the codes and everybody that was out there serviced them correctly, and they got to where they wanted to go. So that would be something I personally would wanna know where he's at, but if the exterior siding products can have something done with them to avoid any weather barrier coming through them, you've probably achieved the intent, not the letter. And I don't know if that's something that should be talked about with the homeowner and yourselves and Arch Design and that type of thing. I don't know if without those conversations being had, if there's if we're in a good spot to give an up or down motion at this time, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or if you've considered alternatives to complete removal to achieve what you're looking for.
Yeah, we have been trying to consider any kind of way around this without violating the code and being able to leave the siding in place. I've spoken to the homeowner about that. That's why I was very happy to see that there was felt in the pictures, but we can't confirm that the felt is still there. And if there's any way, I looked into the smart siding too to see if there was anything in there that could say that it didn't require the weather barrier behind it. I couldn't find anything on there. If there's documentation or an alternative way of doing this, we're definitely open to that without having to tear it off, but we'll have to be given the information. I'm not gonna be able to go out and find that and source that information myself. So it'll be on the homeowner and the contractor to actually give us that information and ask us for that consideration, so we can approve it and move forward with it. We're just saying that weather barrier has to be there. If they can find a different way to do it, and they can prove that it's gonna be just fine without the weather barrier, we're definitely open to that.
Okay. I don't know about the board, what your thoughts are on that. I guess what I'm kinda looking at that is knowing that we can't manufacture code. So it does require you as the general and on top of it, you know, you've got the architect side of it too, so you're kind of doubly responsible in this situation, and you know, I know as a general contractor, I'm always checking products and making sure that what I'm using is gonna be good, knowing that at the end of the day, the warranty lands on my table, one way or the other. So even if the code official approved it, but a lawyer can prove that it's not the right product, I'm gonna lose. And that's just,
Need a new lawyer.
no, that's advice for you. I've been in the business for 50 years and fortunately I've only had to deal with that once, but that was a lot earlier in my career and taught me a lesson 30 years ago. But if there's a way through negotiation, independent testing, or finding some other listing on the sidings or things like that, that you can save not having to pull the siding off, I guess I'd say you should pursue that. But at the end of the day, if you cannot produce something that says that the house is weather tight and doesn't need the air barrier behind it, or that you can get the exterior to act as both, then I think you're in kind of a tough pickle. But I know as far as a code official, they can't manufacture code, and we as a board can't manufacture it either. But the code does allow for alternative methods. And if you can get an alternative method proven, then it may even require some independent testing or whatever, if that cost is a lot less than reciting that house, I would consider pursuing that avenue. But,
Carrying, I'm sorry, I finished.
so with that, I'd ask the board members if you've got any, other things to add along those lines.
I just would like to add that if you
Wait,
do go
wait 1
back.
second, please. The Robert Rules of Order is speak when you're spoken to, and you haven't been yet, so.
Is this a situation where, I don't know what that alternate method is, but if he hires a, I don't know what type of engineer, architect would do this, but if he hires a professional to review the system and approve it, is that an option, or is that not an option because the code doesn't allow it, so it doesn't matter?
The code does allow for alternative methods, and if you can, typically, if you can prove if you can hire an independent testing agency that is a certified testing agency that can prove that this assembly has the same perm rating or the same characteristics as that sheet of weather barrier would have, then it is open for approval. It still has to be approved by the AHJ, but it can certainly be approved. So, so that would probably be the least cost option here if you're able to show, build a 8x8 section of that wall with all the characteristics of the wall as it sits in its current situation there in a testing chamber and show the perm rating and be able to show that the characteristics that are intended by the weather barrier are met by that system, then it should be able to be approved, so. Not saying that'll happen if you build all those things, but, the siding that was used here with the face of that siding and the fanfold material and the sheathing that's on there and the wall system, all those things acting together, if they're able to perform that same way, then, there's an opportunity to approve it then if it can be proved, so.
Anybody else got any comment on that? Mr. Dobbs, do you have something further to say? Good. I think we probably identified an avenue that if Mr. Dobbs wants to proceed and the homeowner down that avenue, that perhaps they can have a better alternative than a complete replacement. So I'm kind of okay with giving this a little more time to see if that's something, but in short of that, with them coming up with something that you can approve, I think it's a reciting job, which unfortunately for you, your insurance probably isn't gonna cover, and things like that. So it's, and I'm just trying to avoid that situation for everybody here, that is there a way to make this work? So,
If I could, just to be clear, that's not an approval that would require this board. That's an approval that you can handle as the AHJ, correct?
Yeah, that is an approval that we can handle as the HJ. Typically, the only time that the board would see approvals like that is if we do not approve it and they appeal the
Got it.
decision.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah, and we're definitely open to something like that. We would prefer that method opposed to reciting, so.
with that in mind, with the codes official being willing to work with you on some type of alternative being approved, I would maybe look for a motion from our board to allow that process to happen, saying that we are not approving it as it is now, but okay with this avenue being pursued. And we'll, work with the codes officials, and if we need to be involved again, we'll deal with that when the time comes.
May I jump in and just make a recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
My only concern is that if Mr. Dobbs comes back with, an alternative method, it's not approved, he would be required to pay the $150 fee to appeal again to this board. Given that the board has 60 days to make a reasonable, or within a reasonable time, which is not to exceed 60 days to make a decision, and Mr. Doms had filed his original appeal on the 15th of April, we would still have time if you wanted to move to continue the hearing until next, I think it was June 5th is the next meeting, and perhaps then hopefully come to that resolution then. That's just an alternative. I'll leave that, of course, entirely up to what the board wishes to do, but that might maybe help simplify things too. Just so, you know, if Mr. Doms isn't satisfied, he doesn't have that burden of having to go through the process again.
You comfortable with that, Sean? Board members, are you comfortable with continuing?
I'd make a motion that we continue it to the next meeting
Do we
to
have a
allow
s-
time for further exploration for alternative means.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is approved. Mr. Doms, if you would want to work with Sean and your homeowner and see what you can get together, something can be resolved by the next meeting, that would be great. Otherwise, I doubt there's a whole lot more we can do at the next meeting if something hasn't been worked out by that time. So, anybody got any other further questions or inputs?
Maybe you would recommend looking at the existing building code maybe too. It might not apply here, but it's worth looking into to see if there's anything in the existing building code that would somehow allow this. I doubt it, but it's worth looking into.
Most of the time, the new stuff that goes in has to meet the current building code. That's what the existing building code says.
Yeah, no, I know it's low odds. I just didn't know with the Buffalo board and being an older material, maybe there's some type of system out there, but worth a shot just to look
Yeah,
at.
yeah, and I mean, the code, that I just said, it does improve each cycle for trying to solve the problems that have been found in building up to that point. You know, back in the 70s when I first started, we did a lot of buffalo sheeting with, you know, masonite siding over it and painted it. Now, that system's probably more weather tight than vinyl siding with a bunch of J-mills.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, we're just trying to kind of define an avenue to hopefully the parties can find a way to make things work, knowing that this is kind of a one-off for you, situation to try to get to the other end of it, and in the future, you know, the code department is now aware that this project has 3 different types, and, you know, we'll probably ask those questions too, but, you know, there's a lot of stuff to go through there, but with that, I think the hearing for yours, I would like to call to a close. If there's nothing further. Okay. The appeal hearing is continued till June 5th. And Sean, if we have any other announcements?
The only announcement we have is Kevin's term would be up here at the end of June, and he has agreed to re-up. So he'll be on the board still.
Thank you.
Should we applaud?
Cake afterwards, maybe.
Other than that, we have no announcements or anything.
All right. With that in mind, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
We are adjourned.